הבינלאומית תילחם בדרך אחידה באויב המשותף של כולנו,
uniquement
Only when the international community starts to be united in fighting our common enemy,
contre notre ennemi commun,
רק אז נדע
only then will we know that we are on the path to victory.
שאנו בדרך לניצחון. כל יהודי וכל יהודייה
tout juif, toute juive,
שירצו לעלות לישראל
Any Jewish man or woman who wishes to come and emigrate to Israel will be greeted with open arms and with all of our warmth.
ובלב חם וחפץ.
That, of course, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu holding a prayer at Paris's Grand Synagogue Sunday night in France. It is deeply, deeply symbolic for him to be there, given the steep rise in anti-Semitism, violence against Jews in the country. Thousands have literally been driven from the country over the last few months, 6,000 in the last year alone. And the targeted attacks of the Jewish Deli Friday was very, very specific. And of course, it's in a deeply historical Jewish strip. 4 Jews there were killed, many others wounded, but the goal was to kill a lot more. Laurie Goldstein joining us now. Good to have you, sir. The attack on this deli was very much targeted. You didn't hear a lot on Friday when the story was unfolding that it was a Jewish deli. It was sold as a grocery store, but it wasn't. The guy that went in specifically wanted to go there to kill dirty Jews, as he called them, who the cartoonists, he was very pleased, got killed because they insulted the prophet. But the Jews made the mistake of being Jewish, and so therefore they're better off dead.
Yeah, and remember, there was another horrible attack in France 2 years ago. School children were killed, Jewish school children. What Netanyahu is doing is not surprising. When Israel was formed after the Second World War, one of its founding principles was that it would be a country that Jews could always go to. It was at that time, in the wake of the Holocaust, it was, well, how can we prevent that happening again? We can have a country that Jews can always go to. So he's really restating a position that has always been Israel's position. Israel has had massive immigration of Ethiopian Jews, black Jews, when there were the troubles in Africa. So what he's doing isn't inconsistent. There is a certain irony, because there is a debate in Israel about who is a Jew, who qualifies as a Jew amongst the Orthodox parties. For example, my wife, under certain of the extreme religious parties in Israel, wouldn't be classified as a Jew.
No, you have to be a purist.
She was a Catholic who converted, but not an acceptable way to the extremists. So there is that bit of irony. But to me, look, it is real. The Israeli immigration officials are predicting that immigration could rise from 1,000 a few years ago to 6,000 a year right now, to up to 20,000 next year. And the reason is that Jews have reason to be fearful in Paris, just as they had, many years ago. Not because here are the vast majority of the population, but because of terrorism. And the other thing is that it's totally appropriate for him to say that, because the 4 Jewish victims are going to be buried in Israel.
Yes.
Their families have requested that, and I believe Netanyahu has granted that. So there was certainly every reason for Netanyahu to be there and say what he did.
There are up to 60 attacks a day on Jews, so many so that the police don't respond to them. They pretty much have told most Jews, hey, you're lucky you didn't get killed, but they have been warned, don't wear your kippah. Don't make yourself marked and known. I mean, just live with this. And that's why so many are fleeing the country, because they know that there is really no one to protect them. But I don't think people understand the importance of Jews to France, because when they got the emancipation back in 1870s, without Jews in France, France fails. It would be considered a great failure.
And in fairness, senior French officials have said that, and they've said it now. But it wouldn't just be a failure on what the Jewish community brings. It would be a failure of morality. It would be a failure of courage. On the other hand, I understand why the police would say that. I had this debate a long time ago with the head of B'nai B'rith, Frank Dumont. And I said, Frank, you're always going on about Jews being a persecuted minority. We're not a persecuted minority in Canada. We have allies everywhere, friends in the community. But he made a very good point to me. He said, yes, but Laurie, you go on the street and people don't know you're Jewish. When the Orthodox go on the street, with the kippah,
with the
big
Hasidic
hats,
Jews,
and the women, they are a visible minority. And he really changed my thinking, because that's true. That's true. And then you're asking somebody to give up how they identify themselves and who they think they are. Well, the problem is that it's my God. My God, what? People can't walk on the street in traditional dress?
Yeah, so someone can wear a turban, someone can, you can wear a burqa, but you can't wear...
Or Muslims.
Hasidic wear?
I mean, Western democracies are founded on the principle that people have those freedoms. So I think it's... the other thing, there was a story in Haaretz and the Israeli media this morning that Netanyahu was originally asked by the French president not to come.
Yeah.
Now, there's confusion about whether it was a security concern, which might be understandable, or he was worried that because Netanyahu was is electioneering right now.
Yeah.
There's an Israeli election in March. He was going to use it to
politic.
Yeah, but to me, I mean, what ended up happening is that Mahmoud Abbas, representing the Palestinian Authority, came, and Netanyahu came, and to me, that's the way it should have been. That's totally appropriate. For heaven's sakes, whatever the tensions between Palestinians and Jews and the wars and the murders, the greatest victims of Islamic terrorism are Muslims by body count.
Yeah. Well, there's 1.7 billion Muslims.
Yes.
There's 18 million Jews worldwide. There aren't very many Jews.
I believe they think that the biggest European population of Jews, about over 500,000, 600,000, is in France. But it's obviously going down.
Look, anti-Semitism is going up around the world. We know that this has happened in the last couple of years. We hear so much about protecting and not alienating Muslims. No one seems to give a darn about the Jews. I mean, this attack on Friday at Shabbat, Shabbat, this was very calculated.
I would say there are countries that don't seem to do that, but that, again, I'm happy I live in Canada. I think we have a prime minister who has been a world leader on making sure that people understand that this isn't just geopolitics, isn't just about oil. This is about moral. Jew hatred. I don't even call it anti-Semitism.
He should have been there yesterday. I was disappointed that he didn't go. I thought he could take a symbolic.
I agree. The public safety minister was there, and he'd been there to lay a wreath at the attack site that we're talking about. But I think that there are times.
I expected that because that's just who he is.
It's important that leaders sometimes make a stand, and I think he should have been there. Having said that, looking at his whole record, I have no complaints with Prime Minister Stephen Harper on security or on caring about Jews or on caring about Muslims.
You wrote a great editorial saying that the approach that we need to deal with this is a little bit Harper, is actually a little bit Trudeau. Now, Trudeau was panned and criticized after the Boston bombings because he came out with the whole root causes approach. And so just line up what you meant by your...
I criticized him at the time because of the question of timing. But Alex, what really influenced me on this was a 2012 Israeli documentary called The Gatekeepers.
Yes,
and
and if you get a chance,
it's incredible.
It's fascinating.
And it interviewed the 6 former living heads of Shin Bet, which is the Israeli Internal Security Service. The Mossad is external security. And these are the guys, these are the hardest of the hard men when it comes to fighting terrorism. They have used tactics which are very controversial in the rest of the world. Mass arrests, coercive interrogation, targeted assassinations. They admit they've killed civilians. They admit they've ordered the summary execution of terrorists. And so on that, and they apologize for none of it. They say, our job is to protect the people of Israel. That's what we're going to do. But when they were asked for their political views, so that would be the Harper position. But when they were asked for their views about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, they were equally condemnatory of both left-wing and right-wing Israeli politicians, saying, you should have made a deal to give the Palestinians a separate state in 1967. You should recognize the Palestinians as people. You've kept building the Israeli settlements. That's wrong.
A lot of Jews would disagree with that too.
In other words, what these men were saying is that there are tactics to fight the terrorism, and that's the Harris view. But that's not a strategy to end the terrorism. To end the terrorism, you have to deal with what's driving the terrorism. And to me, what they're basically saying, and I think it's what all people know, it's a two-pronged approach. You are as tough as possible and ruthless on the terrorists,
forceful and
understanding. But you try for the regular people to reach an accommodation, so you stop the fueling of the anger that leads to the terrorism. They're right, that's what the two of them are saying. I think that's the only approach we can have.
Totally agree. All right, a pleasure, thank you.